So we have some important news in the current efforts to remove suppressors and short-barreled rifles from the NFA nationwide. So let's talk about what is happening. Now, before we jump into the video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to subscribe to the channel. That helps the channel to grow. Also, double check to make sure YouTube is not unsubscribed to you because they love to do that. Another thing you can do to ensure that you get these videos is click the notification bell, turn on all notifications, because that helps to actually ensure that YouTube will send you some of these videos when they're released. And also, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to protecting yourself after a self-defense incident, AOR is in a league of their own. AOR is backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they can help you in self-defense cases that maybe other companies would not. And one of the really cool things about AOR is they're always expanding their benefits and changing up and adding to what they do. So if you're interested, check them out using the links down below in the details section, also in the pinned comment. And if you use my code ARMEDSCHOLAR, you can get $50 off of your individual sign-up plan or $25 off of a family plan. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about what is currently happening right now in response to the $0 NFA tax change that was passed through HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you will know that recently HR 1 passed, and in that new law that was passed, there is a reduction of the NFA tax from $200 to $0, and really all we got in that in regards to the NFA was a reduction of the tax. Now, unfortunately, rhinos in Congress were unwilling to press the issue to get the full versions of the SHORT Act and the Hearing Protection Act that we wanted. They were unwilling to also remove the Senate parliamentarian who was responsible for striking out the full language and versions of those bills that we wanted. And recently, we've also seen some proposed amendments in response to this, where the Democrats, for example, Senator Chris Murphy, introduced a proposed amendment to the military spending bill, which would increase the NFA tax requirement all the way to $4,709 per stamp. So there's been a lot of responses in regards to the NFA tax changes, and Democrats are trying to do the same thing as well. But also there have been additional movements on behalf of the pro-2A side to try to remove the remaining NFA restrictions. Multiple 2A organizations have launched challenges to remove suppressors and SBRs from the NFA outright. You have GOA, FRAC, Palmetto State Armory, Silencer Shop, and others who recently filed lawsuits against the ATF in the Northern District of Texas, and that's currently under the 5th Circuit's jurisdiction. And now also you have FBC, SAF, the NRA, and the ASA who joined together to file a similar lawsuit in the Eastern District of Missouri, which is under the 10th Circuit's jurisdiction. Now, in this Missouri District Court case filed by SAF, they argue that Congress passed the NFA explicitly premised on its enumerated power to lay and collect taxes, and the Supreme Court upheld provisions of the NFA on that basis, holding that the NFA was only a taxing measure and that the registration provisions were obviously supportable as an aid of a revenue purpose. Indeed, the court has described the NFA as an interrelated statutory system for the taxation of certain classes of firearms. That constitutional basis, however, has recently been eliminated with respect to the making, transferring, and receiving of several items which are defined as firearms by the NFA, including suppressors, short-barreled rifles, the short-barreled shotguns, thus making the NFA's restrictions on those items unconstitutional as applied to those arms. They state that the Big Beautiful Bill signed into law by the President on July 4th, 2025 eliminated the making and transfer taxes on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and the NFA defined any other weapons, while leaving the registration requirements intact. In other words, individuals no longer have to pay a tax for the making and transferring of most firearms under the NFA, but the firearms are still required to be registered and are subject to the web of regulations that were designed to aid enforcement of the NFA's now extinct tax provision. So in response to the $0 tax change passed through the Big Beautiful Bill, the plaintiffs here asked this court to declare that the remaining restrictions on SBRs and suppressors, they want to be declared that Congress did not have the power to tax these anymore, that they don't have the power to regulate these because there really is no longer a tax on these items, and that also it violates the Second Amendment. They asked for the ATF and all of its officers and agents to be enjoined from enforcing the NFA and any regulations relating to these now untaxed items. In essence, this would block the ATF from enforcing the NFA against suppressors, SBRs, AOWs, and SBSs, which are now no longer taxed. Now, one of the interesting things in this lawsuit is there have been some procedural changes and some developments in this case. Recently, the parties notified the court that they wanted to hold the traditional response process to the complaint. They wanted to put that on abeyance, and that they instead wanted to move forward on cross motions for summary judgment. So what this means is that both sides, both the plaintiffs and the United States government, the Trump administration, decided to move forward and essentially resolve this case without it going to a full trial. The plaintiffs believe that the NFA's remaining restrictions by default should now fail and essentially fall apart because of the remaining SBR and silencer restrictions are completely dependent on the NFA being a tax, but since there is now no tax on these items, it should essentially be blocked. The government argues in this case that it should actually be dismissed in their favor immediately because the NFA in their eyes is still permissible under the law that was passed by Congress, and it still operates within the constitutional bounds despite there being a $0 tax on these items. However, the court here did something a little bit interesting. The government asked to delay its answer to the original complaint in this case, and they said that they just wanted to move forward on cross motions for summary judgment, but the court denied that request. Instead, the court ordered that the Trump administration here needs to file their answer and that they will file their answer, and both the answer and the traditional processes and the replies and all that will happen along with the motions for summary judgment. So the court appears to want to move forward all filings at the same time instead of stalling out one portion. And this is potentially good because it avoids this case being kind of piecemealed over time and allows this case to reach a final resolution faster, whether on cross motions for summary judgment or on the actual merits and going to a full trial. So that's what this new lawsuit aims to do in response to the NFA tax changes that were passed through the Big Beautiful Bill. One caveat to this challenge is that we don't know right now how the Trump ATF and the Trump DOJ will respond to these challenges. Based on how they've responded in the past in some of these NFA cases, we could get a fast resolution, but I anticipate that they will still argue that the NFA is a permissible restriction, that it doesn't violate the Second Amendment, that it still operates valid despite there being a $0 tax. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Trump DOJ and how the Trump administration now responds to this through that requested answer to the complaint, and then also what they argue in the cross motions for summary judgment in this case, which again is dealing directly with trying to remove all the remaining restrictions on SBRs, SBSs, suppressors, now that there is a $0 tax on those items. So there are currently a lot of moving parts when it comes to the NFA battle, but this is one of those critical cases that is now trying to build off of the $0 tax win that we got in the Big Beautiful Bill, and it's now trying to remove all the remaining restrictions because there is now a $0 tax. So as this moves forward, as we get more information, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, ARMEDSCHOLAR.com. Over there, we have a lot for you guys. Again, if you're interested, check that out by going to ARMEDSCHOLAR.com. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.